Good evening, everybody. Before we start the meeting, I have a few housekeeping announcements to make. First, there are no planned fire alarm tests this evening. If you hear the fire alarm, please leave by the nearest fire exit and make your way to the agreed assembly point, which is St John's Churchyard off Druid Street. Council security staff will be available to direct you. The public toilets are located off the main reception area. Please can you switch off all your mobile phones to silent, and thank you very much for your cooperation on this. I have no further relevant announcements other than to make a personal note to congratulate Councillor James Caldwell on his recent engagement to his partner Amy. And to congratulate, in his absence, Councillor Bill Williams, who's enjoying his honeymoon. And finally, in terms of big occasions, I think Mr Whitfield has a big birthday tomorrow, so we're all on a promise to get away early. I wish to remind everyone that we are required by law to take a recorded vote at key budget decision meetings. This requirement applies to the final substantive vote on items 2.1 and 2.3. Following consultation with the group whips at the Mayor's briefing, the programme motion was considered and copies have now been circulated. It sets out 7 questions on item 2.1, 3 amendments to item 2.1, a minor amendment to be made to recommendation 2 of item 2.3. If amendment C to item 2.1 is passed, some figures will then be amended in item 2.3, Appendix A, paragraph 3. A minor amendment be made to recommendation 3 of item 2.4. Is the programme motion agreed? The clerk will now explain which other papers have been circulated.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Good evening, Council Assembly. Supplemental agenda number 1 contains questions on reports and amendments, and the following papers have been circulated around the chamber this evening. Responses to questions on reports are on blue paper, and the programme motion, which is on white paper. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
All councillors have been granted a dispensation by the monitoring officer to vote on the council tax report. Do any members wish to make any other declaration of interest? When making your declaration, can you please specify if it is a disclosable pecuniary interest? Formal apologies for absence. I have received apologies of absence from Councillor Bill Williams and potential apologies for lateness from Councillor Helen Dennis and Nick Dolezal. Oh, well done, everyone. Are there any further apologies? Okay. Can we approve as a correct record the open minutes of the Council Assembly meeting held on the 28th of October 2018? Oh, November. Agreed. Notification of guillotine. The guillotine will fall at 10 p.m. Item 2.1, Policy and Resources Strategy 2019 to 2020 Revenue Budget. There are 7 questions on the report as set out on the blue paper circulated this evening. I will ask each member who has submitted a question if they wish to ask a supplementary. Members should ensure that their supplementary questions are genuine questions and not speeches. Supplementary questions must arise directly out of the original question or the reply. Questions to the Cabinet Member for Finance, Performance and Brexit, Councillor Vicky Mills. Councillor Michael Situ, do you wish to ask a supplemental question?
Yes, Madam Mayor. I thank the Cabinet Member for the answer given, which is quite comprehensive. Certainly shows that over the last few years, the Council has increasingly spent a great deal of our budget on regenerating our borough. The supplementary question I have is, could the Cabinet Member tell us how the 10.8 million from the London Business Rate pooling pilot will be spent and how this will benefit local residents?
Thank you, Councillor City. Yeah, so the answer I've set out really clearly shows how we would be over £60 million the poorer this coming year if we hadn't seen substantial regeneration and growth and new homes in our borough. And this coming year, we have got in our what we are calling our London Devolution Reserve a one-off fund of £10.8 million that we need to carefully and wisely invest over the next 4 years. And the details of how we're going to spend that are set out in the Policy and Resources strategy that is in front of members this evening. £500,000 of that will be going to the Positive Futures Fund, which Councillor Cottu announced at a recent Council Assembly. This is how we make sure that we are investing in our young people, getting alongside them and really tackling the serious youth violence that we know is present in our borough. We are planning to allocate a substantial sum to the Southwark Pioneers Fund. This will be a fund that I know that Councillor Babudu and Councillor Kieran Williams are particularly working on at the moment to support small and growing businesses and enterprises in Southwark. I think it's only right and proper that the wealth that is being generated by Southwark businesses is reinvested into that strong and local business and local economy. And we will also be investing £2 million in mental health for our children and young people. Really clear that this is preventative money. This is a one-off investment in our schools, in our youth centres, in our frontline work with young people to make sure that the staff working in those areas are able to be that first line as our children and young people begin to struggle with challenges around their mental health. And then there is £2 million set aside for a Brexit risk reserve. Here we are. How many days are left now? Not very many. And we still do not know what is happening with Brexit. I think when we have such a chaotic and incapable Tory government, it is right and proper that we are doing our best to prepare for eventualities that might come out of that very uncertain Brexit. And then finally, members will know that we had proposed taking some money out of our libraries this coming year. It was a really hard decision that we were looking at, and the outcome of that would have been full-day closures at some of our major libraries. I think we thought hard about that, and we realised that was not the right thing to do. So we are setting aside £1 million over 4 years to truly deliver on the spirit of the Libraries and Heritage Strategy, to make sure that those libraries do not have those full-day closures, but also over the 4 years to make sure that we are driving out any efficiencies in our library service and transforming those library services so that they can run as effectively as possible. So that sets them out.
Thank you. Councillor Alice MacDonald, do you wish to ask a supplemental question?
Yes, Madam Mayor. Thanks for the answer to my question about why we're presenting a one-year budget. In your answer, you referred to some areas where there is an uncertainty. Do you agree with me that the Conservative government's failure to provide greater certainty on issues like those set out, including the future of the London business rates pool, is profoundly irresponsible and shows a total lack of regard for local government?
Yeah, I do. I think we have a government that pays very little attention to the huge and important work that we all know here across all parties, the important work that we do in Southwark, but across all local government. We know that we are the first port of call for many, many vulnerable residents here in Southwark, and I think as we come towards the end of our current local government settlement, not knowing what the future holds and how sustainable our services are is a real kind of failure of responsibility by the government. We have a comprehensive spending review that is due. Who knows when that will happen if Brexit is delayed until the summer. We have a fair funding review of local government finance. We have no idea really what that's going to do. There are some really massive long-term challenges around social care that this government is still kicking into the long grass and which profoundly affects what we are able to do. And of course we have Brexit, or no Brexit hopefully. But either way, I think there's been a real failure of this government to help local government plan the sustainable services that our residents need going forward.
Councillor Victoria Elisa, do you wish to ask a supplemental question?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Councillor Mills, for your response to my initial question about the rate of council tax in Southwark. My supplementary question is this. Can the Cabinet member tell us whether Southwark Council's council tax increase is still below where it would have been if we'd raised it in line with inflation each year since 2010?
I do already know the answer. So even taking into account the proposed 2.99% increase this year, Southwark Council tax is almost 10% lower than it would have been if it had increased in line with inflation every year since 2010. It is a really difficult decision that we have to take tonight. I think we all know that council tax is a regressive form of taxation, but it's a difficult decision. But I think making deeper cuts to services that are already stretched to breaking point would be the wrong decision, and I think it's right that we will be voting for a 2.99% increase tonight.
Councillor Renata Hambus, do you wish to ask a supplemental question?
Yes, I do. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Mills, for your response. Now, in light of the fact that nearly half of the council budget needs to be generated locally, do you agree with me that continuing our regeneration and home building in our borough is vital for our long-term financial sustainability and stability? Thank you.
Yes, broadly I do. We've seen from the answer that I gave to Councillor City that regeneration, growth and new homes is contributing over £60 million to our budget this year, and we simply will not be able to do the things that we all want to do if we do not have that level of resource available to us in the future. So yes, I do.
Councillor Cleo Soames, do you wish to ask a supplemental question?
Yes, I do, Madam Mayor. Thank you very much, Councillor Mills, for your response. I do have a supplemental. Can I ask you, given the uncertainty over Brexit and the impact that this could have on the Council's finances, does the Cabinet member agree with me that it would be irresponsible to deplete our reserves this financial year? Thank you.
Thank you for the question, and broadly yes, I do agree with you, and that's certainly the proposal that we are putting forward this evening, which is not to use our reserves. But, of course our reserves are there for a rainy day, and, when it rains we should consider using them. So I actually think that the key question that we need to be asking ourselves is, when we're considering the use of reserves, are we using this one-off money to cover an ongoing pressure without seeking to kind of change or transform or reform that service area? And I think that should be the test for us. And I think, if you look at somewhere like Northamptonshire, that's exactly the test that they failed, and look where they ended up.
Councillor Tom Flynn, do you wish to ask a supplemental question?
Yes, I'd like to thank the Cabinet member for her answer, and to ask, our government grant is now less than half of what it was in 2010, thanks to successive Conservative and Lib Dem governments. Can the Cabinet member tell us what happened to Southwark's government grant under the last Labour government?
What an excellent question. Thank you, Councillor Flynn. It's difficult to, really compare like with like because of, kind of changes in responsibilities and how they've been funded and specific government grants. But I think I can say with absolute certainty that under the last Labour government, local government funding and spending increased year on year.
Councillor Ian Wingfield, do you wish to ask a supplemental question?
Yes, I do, Madam Mayor. Thank you. Can I thank the Cabinet member for her response? And could the Cabinet member confirm that the information in the response will be provided in the annual budget report for future years, please?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent suggestion, and I'm definitely happy to commit to doing that.
Thank you. We now move to the debate. The Cabinet Member for Finance, Performance and Brexit will present the report. Councillor Vicky Mills, you have 10 minutes in which to speak.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So it's hard to feel delighted about a council budget when we're in the 10th successive year of cuts. Central government funding for Southwark has reduced by 50% since 2010, and coupled with inflation and demand for services, we've had to find £250 million worth of savings since 2010, and that's massive. Others here may feel more hopeful about an end to austerity, but on the horizon I can see a comprehensive spending review, local government funding review, and the control of that by a cruel and chaotic Tory government only leaves me feeling huge uncertainty. And that's absolutely compounded by the fact that we stand at the cliff edge of Brexit and the economic damage that that will do. Brexit's going to be bad for all our public services, but it's going to be particularly bad for local government because we have become increasingly exposed to external economic downturns. In 2010, 20% of our budget requirement was dependent on council tax and business rate growth. Next year, that figure will be 51%. But despite that bleak picture, I do want to thank my Cabinet and my Labour colleagues for their determination to find really progressive solutions to the challenges that we face. And I want to pay tribute to those council officers who've worked tirelessly to find ways to deliver our big ambitions in the toughest of times. Particularly, I want to thank our Strategic Director of Finance, Duncan Whitfield, for all the hours he and his team have dedicated to this budget. It may have aged him, but I can still say that he doesn't look a day over 59. So I do take some pride in being able to present a really radical, municipal, socialist, but also balanced and prudent budget this evening. And as far as I can tell, this is the first year that the Lib Dems opposite haven't proposed a full alternative budget. Every saving, every efficiency, every plan for income generation has their support. Proof, perhaps, that you can be both left-wing but also capture the centre ground. And of course, this year we don't have the usual Dulwich Amendment, and that's a welcome reminder that Southwark is a Tory-free zone, blue, red or otherwise. And we know that huge transformation of services has already happened, no more so than in our adults and children's social care. And these are services where pressure has only grown over the last 9 years. And over the last 4 years, we certainly did dip into reserves to slowly and carefully transform those services. And that approach was about keeping our investment in prevention and early help. And that is now paying dividends, both in budget terms, but also in better outcomes for service users. In adults, we've invested in home care and reablement, and we've really improved the resilience of vulnerable residents. And in children's, our Access to Resources panel is really tightly holding those children with the greatest, but often the most expensive needs, so that they don't end up in high cost and poor quality residential placements. And that is really huge and challenging work. And we didn't fix the roof when the sun was shining. Instead, we have to fix it when it was pouring with rain. But in every time of really profound change, we know that those who've got wealth and privilege have always been able to look after themselves. So as Southwark Labour, our duty is absolutely to serve the people who need us most. People who are the most vulnerable, but also those people on middle and modest incomes. We know that they don't want to feel on their own when there's confusion and government failure. We need to be on their side. But we can't wave a magic wand and create money that doesn't exist. And we'll never serve the most vulnerable in our community if we use money unwisely or we fritter money away on badly or poorly run services. And that's why we have to choose our priorities, and that's why we have to make tough choices and make sure that every penny we spend is spent with care to secure the maximum value. So those tough choices mean that we are going to bring in a charge of garden waste. It means we look again at our litter picking. It means that we are proposing that businesses that operate during the night time should make a contribution to cleaning up the alcohol-related crime and antisocial behaviour of their clients. Tough choices also mean that after careful thought, we are proposing a council tax rise of 2.99%. And as I've already said, it's not a decision we take lightly, but deeper cuts to services would be the wrong choice. We're committed to keeping our libraries and children's centres open. We're committed to continued investment in our parks. We want to expand free gym and swim for all. Having helped 5,000 people into work and 2,000 people into our apprenticeships, it's our ambition to do even more. And we want Southwark to be a place with a strong economy and where children have the best start in life. And to do that, we do need to properly consider all the financial levers we have available to us, including council tax. And we recognise that that does put pressure on low-income households. So that's why our council tax reduction scheme will remain unchanged for another year. And that means that 12,000 working-age households will continue to receive support and pay no more than 9p extra a week, and that nearly 7,000 eligible pensioners will continue to receive 100% relief on council tax. It's also a tough choice, actually, to challenge ourselves to do the new things, to do more things, and it's even harder to find ways to deliver on those things. But if we live in a time of great uncertainty, then it must be a time of great ambition. And so that's why this budget is still a budget of big ideas. That's why we're going to roll free school meals out to our nursery schools and school nurseries. We want to take on the challenge of childhood obesity sooner. That's why every primary school child will get a theatre visit. Children who live on the doorstep of amazing arts and culture should be able to access it. It's why we're going to introduce free swimming lessons, because we need to remove every barrier to a fit and healthy life. And that's why we'll roll out even more charging points for electric vehicles, because we are already paying catch-up if we want to live in a city where the air is fit to breathe. I want to touch briefly on the Lib Dem Amendments that are being tabled this evening. I understand that they are strictly non-political and they are not about virtue signalling at all. But I do ask you, if the Met Police, which has already been devastated by austerity, was presented with £1 million, would they actually be able to get more police on Southwark streets? And does this proposal not risk a situation where policing is dependent on the wealth of an area rather than dependent on need? We have got to play a bigger part in youth violence, and that's why the analyst we are proposing is a really careful, well thought out way to understand that challenge. On rough sleeping, I think our response is that it risks duplicating the work that the council already does. In June last year, we were successful in securing over £600,000 from the government's Rough Sleeping Initiative grant. That's already paying for dedicated nurses, dedicated outreach officers, domestic abuse support workers, and it's supporting those people sleeping rough in Southwark, as well as adding 2 bed and breakfast places. I acknowledge that there is a particular problem with EEA residents who can find themselves without recourse to public funds. So I do want to offer the reassurance that those who are being left destitute and on the streets are being picked up, and depending on their exact circumstances, that would either be by our no recourse to public funds team or by the rough sleeping work that I've outlined above. But in the spirit of cross-party working, myself and Councillor Cryan are absolutely committed to reviewing that and ensuring that there are none of those EEA residents slipping through any gaps. And instead of actually duplicating the work that we're doing now, actually the challenge that we all should be talking about is, once that government money runs out next March, how do we continue to sustain the current service that we have? And of course, one solution to that might well be the Labour plans to roll out a borough-wide licensing scheme in the private rented sector. And whilst I appreciate it would be absolutely convenient to simply turn that on April the 1st, it's probably helpful to remind colleagues opposite that such a scheme is dependent on a really robust body of evidence that has to be directly related to antisocial behaviour, it's dependent on proper consultation, and finally it's dependent on Secretary of State approval. And suggesting that this, along with a voluntary tourist tax, could be in the position to fund services in 5 weeks' time strikes me as exactly the kind of financial planning that underpinned Northamptonshire. So in these tough times, there are tough choices, but I think that coupled with really prudential planning and some radical ideas, we have a good budget in front of us this evening. And we're going to agree a budget that means that we spend wisely. It means that we're open and honest about what we can, but what we can't do. It means that we are listening so that we make the very best decisions for Southwark. It means that we protect our most vulnerable residents and that we come to the aid of those in need. And it will, of course, ensure that we continue to build a fairer future for all.
Perfectly timed there, Councillor Mills. Thank you. The majority opposition spokesperson to respond, Councillor Jane Salmon, you have 5 minutes in which to speak.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The casual reader might skim through this budget and they may conclude that there is nothing particularly new in it. It seems that this is not an administration coming up with any new ideas or proposals, with not much difference from this time last year. But it is worth digging a little deeper into what the Labour administration has been up to. For example, back in December, when the first draft was released, in the small print we saw plans to cut funding for community councils. No explanation was given as to why these cuts were needed, and no explanation was given as to why they were silently dropped. Then, in the first 4 proposals of the budget, after loudly boasting their promise during the election to keep libraries open, Labour announced plans to close libraries for part of the week. After being scrutinised by Liberal Democrat councillors at the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, within 2 days the administration finds £1 million to prevent these cuts for the rest of the term. Where has this money come from? We're simply not told. It's a similar case with the Labour amendment to their own budget. The whole thing reeks of incompetence on a number of different levels. Firstly, this budget has been on the agenda for quite some time. The fact that any amendment from this administration is needed at all shows that policy is made and money allocated on the hoof, and clearly at the last minute. This is entirely unnecessary and unjustifiable. Secondly, this Labour administration seems to be entirely unaware that the Met Plus scheme is not being scrapped. The Mayor is proposing a reduction in the money, and the Met is not abolishing the scheme altogether. That might be something that you should have been aware of when making this policy. Given this latest update, will the Cabinet member now change their calculations, or say what they will do with the money from the new Met scheme, assuming, of course, they'll find it worthwhile applying for it? Thirdly, the Labour amendment is blatantly not properly costed. £250,000 is supposed to come from the Council resolving to make rigorous efforts to collect fees and charge notices in full. Presumably, if the amendment didn't pass, they'll continue to make half-hearted efforts, rather than rigorous ones, to collect fees and charges. What this budget does show is the complacency and laziness of a tired administration that has been in charge for almost a decade and has reached the end of its worth and ideas. We are the party setting the agenda. Last year, Labour councillors opposite were haranguing us for introducing a late-night levy and calling us reckless for claiming it would raise £120,000. They said it was an unnecessary policy. This year, they're introducing it themselves, claiming it will raise £200,000, and now submitting an amendment calling for the councils to spend more money to facilitate the nighttime economy. Hopefully next year we will see Labour introducing Lib Dem policies such as borough-wide licensing scheme, a knife crime unit and a new rough sleepers hub. Though even in our optimism, we don't expect to see any move from this Labour cabinet to scrap their golden goodbyes. At the last local election, there were several councillors opposite who couldn't hide their glee at the chance of creating a one-party borough. We've seen how much Labour loathe the idea of diversity of views, not least in the move to withdraw the whip from councillors who take a perfectly principled stand in favour of a people's vote. What this budget shows, however, more than anything else, is the value that an effective opposition brings. We have set the agenda for this budget. Without us, Labour would have driven through their original plans for library cuts. Without us, increased funding for police officers would not be on the agenda. Without us, there is every likelihood that the perks Labour give themselves with council taxpayers' money would run rampant. My colleagues will go into greater detail about the amendments we propose. Our amendments deal with 2 of the most urgent issues facing our borough and communities: knife crime and rough sleeping. A dedicated knife crime unit, staffed by police officers, will be a vital part of the solution to reducing the all too frequent cases of death and attacks on our streets. A free at the point of access hub for rough sleepers will also be a significant step towards helping that situation. Nothing in either amendment is or should be morally objectionable to Labour. Nothing in either amendment is financially undeliverable. The only reason not to vote for them would be to prioritise narrow party politics over implementing policies that will make a real improvement to people's lives. With that in mind, I urge all councillors to support all three amendments.
Thank you. There are 3 amendments to this report. We will have a single joint debate on all the amendments. Councillor William Ongbo to move Amendment A, police officers, not press officers.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. All here will agree that the situation at the moment with the knife crime has been rising, and it is a tragedy for our borough. It is also a challenge for us elected councillors to find a tangible solution to try to tackle the issues. This is not a political attack. This is the reality. In the Greater London now, we are number 1, unfortunately, in knife crimes. We have exceeded the level of Brent Council in this area. This is not an area where we should play party political games. We should jointly find the solutions to tackle the issues. And recently, I realized there were 2 new positive developments in this. Firstly, some Labour councillors have realized finally that the council should allocate more fundings for the policing. This is something we've been fighting for a very long time. And I'm very glad that some Labour councillors are agree with us in this line. Secondly, we also working closely with the Southwark Youth Violence Panel. My excellent colleague, Councillor David Knox, are working with the Southwark councillors, the Labour councillors, on this panel, and with mutual respect, we have tried to look at different approach of the issues. We have looked at the public health issues, and also we have looked at the way we should tackle the educational aspect of it. In these positive steps forward, we need to also introduce the knife crime unit. The knife crime unit is very important for the success of our machinery to tackle the crimes. At the moment, the police has been cut, and even if they try to do their level best to tackle the crimes, they have become a reactive force, they are not a proactive force. So the knife crime unit will be undertaking long-term investigations, surveillance, and also intelligence gathering in order to have a better way to handle the situations. In this proposal that we have in our amendment, we are proposing £1 million. £1 million to save life. Last time around, we have not a single councillor or 2 councillors supporting us in our amendment. This time around, we want all of you here to support us in this amendment, because £1 million can save life. What's the value of one life? A life of an individual from birth to death. It is more than £1 million, but with £1 million, we have a better deal to tackle the crimes. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor David Noakes to second Amendment A.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. In moving this amendment, I'd like to begin my speech by acknowledging the hard work that is currently being done by Southwark Police, officers in the Council and our partners in the Safer Southwark Partnership to tackle and reduce crime and antisocial behaviour in the borough, and in particular knife crime. I think it is also important to state that the complexities around the rise in knife crime and youth violence will not be tackled by a single interventional approach. In fact, the more you look into the drivers of youth violence, the more complex you realise it is, and that enforcement on its own will not resolve the underlying causes. Turning to the amendment, the reason we are once again urging the administration to consider investing in more police officers is that police numbers across London have been reduced to a level where it is having a detrimental impact on the ability of the Met to carry out proactive operations and keep our streets safe. As of December 2018, the total number of police officers in London was 29,654, and in Southwark there was only 628 officers. This is a reduction of over 100 police officers in Southwark over the last 2 years. I have no doubt that all members would agree that this is simply too low for both our borough and for our city. This has been acknowledged by the Mayor of London, who has raised the GLA preset by an average of £26.28 to fund an extra 300 police. It is for this reason that we believe the Council should consider a time-limited commitment to pay for the recruitment of additional police officers, and that this should be funded by reducing our expenditure on communications, making some considered cuts in SRA posts and golden goodbyes, and making more efficient use of council buildings. This would raise an extra £1 million and pay for the equivalent of 1 inspector, 2 sergeant and 14 PCs. Furthermore, the Met confirmed last week that they are launching a new scheme called Partnership Plus to replace the Met Patrol Plus scheme, which will allow local authorities to purchase additional police officers at a reduced rate to police local areas and focus on local issues. The press release also specified that these officers will be directed to focus on a range of demands the Met faces, including violent crime. When we argued for this last year, the administration said the Council did not have the money to make this commitment, that the Met Patrol Police scheme was being abolished and the scheme couldn't be used to combat violent crime. I believe our amendment and the recent announcement by the Met deals with all of those concerns. I would also like to say that I'm pleased to see that in Amendment C, the administration have acknowledged the need for the Council to protect our police numbers and to recruit a local police intelligence analyst to support the work of the police and the Council to tackle crime and youth violence. This commitment will protect police numbers in the nighttime economy team and strengthen the partnership's work in relation to youth violence, and we will be supporting this amendment. What it will not do, though, is increase the number of police officers in our borough to ease the pressure on our existing police force. We live in challenging times, and I believe the best interests of our borough and our residents would be served by us coming together. I am also confident that residents would support the Council investing in additional police officers for a time-limited period, and I hope all members will support this amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Victor Chamberlain to move Amendment B, a roof over every head.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This budget amendment seeks to raise £500,000 to provide a much-needed hub for rough sleepers in our borough. Not only is it the right thing to be doing, but we can do this by raising additional sources of income without making any cuts or efficiency savings. It will come as no shock to anyone here that rough sleeping is on the rise in Southwark. It's apparent from walking down every high street, and it comes up frequently when we talk to our residents. It's hard to measure the true scale of rough sleeping, but official statistics show that it's more than doubled since 2014. Between October and December of last year, outreach teams saw almost 50 more people rough sleeping than in the same period of 2017. We should applaud moves that the Council has taken to address this issue so far. Southwark is following, and in some cases it's leading, best practice on homelessness prevention. Pathways off the street are proving successful for some, but especially those that are new to rough sleeping. But sadly, it's not providing support for everyone. The Mayor of London's 2018 action plan for rough sleeping identifies 2 key groups that are being underserved by current arrangements. They're the long-term rough sleepers and they're non-UK nationals. There's an acute lack of immediately available accommodation for rough sleepers who are not able or eligible to engage with the Council's current models. This is particularly true for the 50% of Southwark's entrenched rough sleepers who have no recourse to public funds, and also to those for whose substance misuse means they are unable or unwilling to engage at this time. We know that 30 to 40% of Southwark's rough sleepers come from Europe. This is only going to increase if Brexit actually happens, and even more people will be left destitute in our borough. We need a permanent solution where people can get off the street while they get the advice and support that they need to reconnect with schemes that are available, such as Routes Home. Our failure to help rough sleepers is scandalous. Long-term rough sleepers often have very complex personal situations involving drugs, alcohol and mental health. They need our support. 8 in 10 rough sleepers are victims of crime. Southwark is also seeing the largest rise in the deaths of rough sleepers. There have been 34 in the last 5 years alone. That puts us in the top 10 local authorities in the country for the deaths of rough sleepers, and that's just scandalous for a borough like ours. I'll finish with the story of one of the current clients at St Mungo's, who's been sleeping rough for several years in our borough. He's been a heroin user in the past, and he's been engaging with drug and alcohol services. He's also been engaging with medical treatment, and until recently he was receiving support from St Mungo's floating hubs, which are essentially temporary versions of what we're proposing in this amendment. Sadly, that funding has now been left.
Please, Councillor Chamberlain.
I will do. Despite what was said earlier, there is no alternative accommodation that he can go to that will accept his dog, and this is simply not an option for him.
Thank you, Councillor Chamberlain. Councillor Hamish McCallum to second Amendment B.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm incredibly proud to be seconding the Liberal Democrat Amendment B to tackle rough sleeping in our borough, an issue which is increasingly becoming apparent, I think, for all of us and certainly anyone who lives here in Southwark. In fact, for me personally, rough sleeping has increased in Southwark every year that I've lived here, and has increased 370% since I first moved into our area. That's a frankly frankly, scandalous state of affairs and something which I'm sure no one in this council chamber would want to be laying credit or ownership of. The cabinet member spoke about the work that Southwark's already doing and the fact that these rough sleepers are sort of already being picked up, I think were her words. But quite clearly that is not the case. We have the highest number of rough sleepers in the borough right now today, or this year, that we have had for many, many, many years. And that's not something which we should be accepting so easily. We know that rough sleepers have a very poor quality of life. We know that their life expectancy is just on average 47 years, about half the life expectancy of any other member of society, the average member of society. Again, that's not something that we should be accepting. All of this we know. I also know that there is good work happening here in Southwark, and I'm not seeking to criticise everything which is going on. In fact, I'm not seeking to criticise very much at all that is going on here. I've got enormous respect for the officers who are tackling this issue day in, day out across our borough, and I think we all owe them a huge amount of credit and applause for the work that they do. But quite clearly, there is a problem here. We're aware, aren't we all, that Brexit is coming down the tracks and is going to have a massive impact. We're aware that the scale of the problem is already very bad. We're aware that it's only going to get worse and worse if people who have no recourse to public funds in particular are forced out onto the streets. In fact, that problem itself has been acknowledged in the Mayor of London's recently published rough sleeping plan. And that is why the Liberal Democrats are proposing this evening a permanent, not just a one-year fix, but a permanent rough sleeping hub offering free at the point of access accommodation for those who are either unable or ineligible to access the support already here. It's complementary, not a duplication of the efforts which are already happening. It's something which has already been done in the Labour-run Oxford Council, so it's not something which should be a point of opposition for this Labour group. And I hope that the Labour councillors here tonight will join with the Liberal Democrats to support this amendment and deliver this vital service for the most vulnerable people in our borough. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Andy Simmons to move Amendment C, Police and the Nighttime Economy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. In 2010, the Liberal Democrat and Tory coalition government started its approach to austerity, and from 2010 to 2015, they inflicted a devastating series of cuts on Southwark, on London, on our country. This included huge cuts to local government, to our National Health Service, to the new building of social housing, and a huge impact on benefit cuts, including the bedroom tax. Councillor Humbo and Councillor Noakes, like Southwark Labour, make good points on the tragedy of knife crime. But year zero didn't start 2 years ago, it started in 2010. And since that time, we've lost more than 200 police officers, more than 200 PCSOs, and more than 100 back office staff. So more than 500 of our police team have gone as a direct result of the austerity that the Liberal Democrats and the Tories have poured down on us in the last 9 years. With cuts of roughly £1 billion to the Met, Sadiq Khan has prioritised protecting and enhancing police numbers, and we've got to tip our hat to him. Southwark's nighttime economy team comprises a sergeant and 5 PCs, and they are a critical part of dealing with the highs and lows of the nighttime economy here in Southwark. The buy one get one free police scheme is changing, but we don't yet have the full details going forward. Councillor Salmon made a series of interesting points, almost all of which were incorrect in terms of our amendments. Very simply, if we get a better deal coming from the new buy one get one free scheme, then more money will be available for fighting crime in Southwark, and that money will be reallocated accordingly. We don't know the full details, and we look forward to hearing from them as soon as possible. I've met with the borough commander and pressed on him the importance of the nighttime economy, and it's something that he is committed to, absolutely, and he recognises its importance. But the more support that we can give him and the rest of the hard-working police team across the borough, the better. The pattern of crime, including knife crime, varies daily, and I think being very specific and saying we want an intelligence analyst is a really important part of the amendment today. Clearly, the council will be collecting as much as it can in fees and charges, given the budget. And yes, we've had to go back to press the Director of Finance on this issue, but he's fully behind the amendment and signed up to it. I just wanted to end by making the point that every single Liberal Democrat administration from 2002 to 2010 made an amendment to their own budget, almost always written by Conservative Councillor Toby Eckersley. And on that note, I'd urge you to support this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Simmons. Councillor Kath Whittam to second Amendment C.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We're all aware how much crime and disorder have become an unwelcome addition to our borough, and how hard the police are working though they are stretched to breaking point. The council wants to do as much as possible to keep our streets safe by working with the police and other local groups such as Team London Bridge Bid. The nighttime economy can be a trigger to these unwelcome incidents, so it's important that our nighttime economy is policed well so that people can have a good time and stay safe. The nighttime levy will give some resources to help in this regard, but it's not enough for us to even stand still. In previous years, we've brought extra policing to bring our team up to a level where it's sustainable through the Patrol Plus scheme, but it is changing. And Southwark Council is committed to maintaining at least the same level of police presence, which is why we want to add in this £201,846 to the budget for the nighttime economy team. We do need to make the best use of this extra money, so the local intelligence analysts will be engaged so the team is targeting the right areas to make the money be as effective as possible. The analysts will particularly be focusing on youth crime. So this 55,000 will be for that specialist advice and expertise. The analysts will be able to give us information on what type of crime is happening, reviewing trends and identifying key areas of concern and comparing our performance with neighbouring boroughs. They'll be able to show us where the crime is happening, producing area profiles, when the crime is happening, temporal analysis, date, time, seasonality, and horizon scanning. Who are the victims and who are the suspects, producing profiles of who is being targeted. What are the local crime drivers, for example, drug markets, county lines, etc.? What methods are being used to commit the crime, looking at different modes of operation? The analysis will include crime mapping and problem profiles by area and topic. So they will enrich the work the Council already does, but in a very targeted and time-sensitive way. We do need to make sure that we keep pressure on the government to provide more police at the same time, so please support the amendment.
Thank you. I have a list of 20 members who have indicated they wish to speak, so we'll try and get through as many as possible. I'd like to call Councillor Maggie Browning.
As Councillor Mills has highlighted, Southwark schools will continue to suffer increased pressure on the dedicated schools grant this year, with many schools facing budget deficits. The lack of adequate funding for the high needs block is a particular concern due to the impact it will have on the learning of students with SEND needs, for whom the right support is so essential to their learning and progress. The Council is working with our schools to deal with the shortfall left by inadequate government funding, but yet again there is an example of local councils left cleaning up the mess made by this Conservative government. The government spending review will be taking place this year, and it is essential the government use it as an opportunity to end the assault on school funding. According to the Institute for Fiscal Studies, per pupil funding has fallen by 8% since 2010. The spending review must increase per pupil funding in order to reverse the savage cuts to school budgets, and adequate funding for SEND support must be a priority. If we're going to create an egalitarian society with every child has the opportunity to reach their full potential, then proper funding and support for our teaching assistants, teachers and students is absolutely non-negotiable. And I think it's up to us as councillors to really put pressure on the government to consider the importance of adequate school funding in their spending review. I'd also just like to add, as the new Borough Mental Health Champion, I'm delighted the Council is committed to supporting 100% of young people to access the mental health support they need by 2020, and are putting in the necessary funding to achieve this.
I call upon Councillor Leo Pollock.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Part of the backdrop to both the revenue and capital budgets that we are considering today, as well as the revenue and capital budgets in the HRA we're not considering today, is the acute crisis of affordable housing supply that we have in our borough that leaves so many people without secure, affordable, humane housing that implies a cost of living pressure on people day to day and reproduces inequalities across generations. We've heard powerfully about the scale of rough sleeping in the borough. We should always be reminded too that there are over 20,000 people on our council house waiting list, more than 2,000 children growing up in temporary accommodation, and more than 27,000 people claiming housing benefits to meet their housing needs. And for this reason, it is the principal priority of this council to do everything in its power to bring forward new council homes. Over the next fortnight, we will begin the process of handing over keys on not one, not two, not three, but 67 new council homes in Sumner Road and Peckham. Incredible achievement for the community and the council. To families who are overcrowded, parents will find relief for secure, affordable housing, and children whose chances in life will be markedly improved. But these 67 homes are the tip of the iceberg. We now have an enormous pipeline of new homes, over 70 sites in every ward in the borough, that amounts to 15 council estates worth of new homes, in addition to the 600 already delivered. And I want to assure this council assembly, following the new homes delivery model review that colleagues and officers have been working very hard on, that this pipeline is a constantly moving feast. Every month I see schemes moving from feasibility to design, from design to planning, planning to procurement, and eventually on site. And in the last few weeks, we've seen 13 new council homes coming on site in Tustin Estate, 29 at Meeting House Lane, 12 in Tender Road in Bermondsey, 28 in Sow Gardens in Camberwell. I could go on. And with more than 20 further sites coming into contracted procurement and appointment in the next few, currently as we speak, I'm really confident that by the end of the year, this year, we will not be able to move for council homes development sites in this borough. With the programme motion in mind, I'm conscious, Madam Mayor, that this growing pipeline is inherently linked and wouldn't be possible without the sound prudential financial management of this council, but it is strongly linked to the growing temporary accommodation budget pressures that we have, not to mention the social care demands that are so often the product of over-expensive, cramped, substandard housing that we see in particular in the private rented sector. But we are driving forward council housing as model dwellings, the visible manifestation of a borough that's governed for the many, not the few. So I want to commend the determined work of our budget working group, and in particular of Councillor Mills, who has brought a budget together this evening of that of a radical socialist council that's giving us the best fighting chance to solve our housing crisis. Thank you.
Thank you. I call Councillor Dan Whitehead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think everyone in this chamber can probably get on board with the idea that the cuts that have been made to local government are extensive and outrageous. Decisions made during the financial crisis to cut local government budgets were made in many cases as a necessity, as outlined by many respected financial institutions, including the IMF and others. And I don't want to let Councillor Simmons get away with the attack on the Liberal Democrats. In 2008, the austerity cuts began. Let's be very clear that Alistair Darling began austerity, and it was continued and supported by the Labour Government Manifesto in 2010. The arguments that drove these decisions no longer apply. The Conservative government is forcing through additional cuts as a result of fiscal ideology rather than any specific economic rationale. These decisions are having a dreadful impact on our adult social care and youth services in local authorities across the country. And the situation is only likely to get worse if we leave the EU. But here we are, as central government cuts continue. Southwark must decide what its spending priorities are and seek to save money in areas which constitute non-essential services. Tonight, me and my colleagues will outline a variety of measures, sensible ones that are entirely feasible and can be decided on tonight to build a knife crime unit that helps save young lives, and also a homeless hub to get homeless people off our streets. One of these proposals is to consolidate the office space across the council. The move to Tooley Street has unquestionably been a major success. The office is a highly accessible location for both residents and staff, but this wonderful resource is not being used to fulfil its potential, and is coming at an unnecessary cost. In Zone 1, London floor space is a commodity that needs to be used efficiently. For many organisations, their largest overhead is not the staff who are offering the value and contributing their knowledge and experience, but office space. Here on the ground floor of this building, we have significant amount of space that is barely used at all. We therefore suggest various novel approaches that could be adopted. That includes further encouraging flexible working across the council, offering full-time staff the option to move to a 4-day working week, and therefore freeing up extra desk space in order to consolidate the offices that we already have, and renting out the rooms that we have here on the ground floor for commercial and also communities to be able to use in order to generate additional funds for the council. These are sensible steps that this administration could take today. This isn't about virtue signalling, as being suggested. It's about doing the right thing. As Councillor Salmon said, let's put narrow party politics aside here and try and vote for our amendments. Thank you.
Thank you. I now call Councillor Jasmine Ali.
Madam Mayor, I want to start by congratulating Councillor Mills on her first budget and for a great job. The top budget lines for my portfolio: adults 98.7 million, children 59.2 million, education 8.5 minus the DSG. This represents about 2/3 of the council's overall budget, and over the past few years it felt almost impossible to balance these budgets. But in truth, the financial position for adults and children's services is a good news story. And this is no Oscar speech, I promise, but credit where it's due. Thanks to the commitment of everyone in the children and adults workforce for balancing quality of service with budgets. And thanks, obviously, to all my predecessors, including Councillor Dixon-File, Councillor Mills, Councillor Cryan, Councillor Livingstone, for their part in getting us where we are today. So what's the story? The adult care, 98.7 million, with a commitment to save 5 million. The good work of the Budget Recovery Board means that we now have a safe, sustainable, effective system based on a shift towards home care, a reablement team to reassess care packages to help people work towards independence. Children's social care, 59.2 million. Last year, Children's Services budget declared 4 million overspent. Now we're actually breaking even. And we have done this through the creation of an all-age disability team, creation of access to resources team, and the creation of a single point of access for any child coming into our care. And on balance, these efficiencies have helped transform and protect many of our services, like keeping all our children's centres open, protecting our youth offending services, building new nursery homes, and I'm especially proud to announce we will use the 2 million of new money that we've heard about today to build prevention in our schools so that we can identify children with mental health needs early on and get them the support that they need. Supporting a key need of our community, protecting our children, securing them a future, delivering on our manifesto commitment as a council and as a party. We have shown that as a Labour council, with Labour policies, we can manage in a harsh financial climate, but the threats of this vicious Tory government loom large. There is a crisis in care, and since 2010, when the Tories and Lib Dems kicked off austerity, funding for children's services has fallen by a third per child in England. Funding in adult care has fallen by 800 million. And there is a crisis in education, and we ourselves are looking at 11 million deficit on the high needs block for children with special education needs, as Maggie has already pointed out. We need now, more than ever, is a Labour government that will break this cruel stranglehold on the desperately needed services, a Labour government that will free our councils to invest in our children, invest in our people, and invest in our country's future. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I now call Councillor Eliza Mann.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would like to speak about a roof over every head. I'm very pleased to have the chance to speak in support of the Liberal Democrat amendment to the council budget, a roof over every head. We all know that homelessness is a growing problem in Southwark, and both the statistics and our own eyes tell us that the number of people without a home who are forced to sleep rough is going up too. When I was mayor 10 years ago, I used to go out with the street pastors and talk to people who are young and old who are sleeping rough on the streets. I'm saddened that more and more people are now finding they have nowhere else to go. In my own ward, residents frequently tell me at surgeries that they are concerned at the number of people sleeping rough permanently or getting down in the stairwells on the Dickens estate. At present, as I speak, there may be one sleeping over my flat because he's been cited by many residents and the cleaner. I know that they agree with me that it is unacceptable in one of the richest countries in the world that so many people don't have somewhere safe to go home. Liberal Democrats understand that homelessness and rough sleeping are complicated issues without a single fix. We know that many of the things that contribute towards people sleeping rough are not in the council control. We also recognize that the council has done a lot of good work towards helping rough sleepers in our borough. But as we heard in my colleague's Councillor Chamberlain's speech, there are still some people who are being left behind. The Mayor of London's rough sleeping plan of action published last year highlights that the longer someone has been sleeping rough, the harder it can be for them to access support. Nearly all of these people have some combination of mental health problems, substance abuse problems, and serious physical health issues. I have recently had my own health issues, as many here will know. It has not been easy for me to cope with them, but I fight on with the support of my colleagues here and my friends and family, and the knowledge that I have a safe place to call home. I can only imagine how hard it must be to cope with multiple health problems when you don't have a support network or somewhere safe to sleep. That's why I'm supporting this motion to provide a hub where long-term rough sleepers can get both immediate respite from the street as well as access treatment for their health issues. The hub will be based upon the floating hub model run by St. Mungo's.
Please conclude. Just please wind up.
Just finish my sentence. Funded by the GLA, but will permanently available to people who outreach teams find sleeping rough in our borough. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Mann. I now call upon Councillor Kieran Williams.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is my 5th year of setting a budget, and it's a 5th year of pride and of anger. Pride at the way my Labour group has gone about setting this budget, not just the front bench, but the back benchers who put in a huge amount of care and attention into every line of the budget you see before you. Pride at the workers of Southwark Council who spend all year round working out how they can make each pound we spend go further. And pride, more than anything, at quite how far we have managed to make this Labour Council stretch the pounds we have. That we've managed to keep all of our libraries open, improve our parks, keep our children's centres open, improve many of our services, and deliver an ambitious manifesto again. And all of that in the face of rising demand, a bigger population, and slashed funding. But at the same time, it is absolutely anger. It is anger at having, again, to work out how we take money out of our council's budget. And that the savings that we make can't be reinvested in meeting the very real needs of the people of our borough, in tackling disadvantage, in lifting people out of poverty. That's not right. It's anger that, again, the Tories have taken more money from boroughs like ours that need it most than they have from the ones they represent themselves. And above all, it's anger that through all this, the impact of all this is on the people of our borough. It's the opportunity it takes away from them. The Tories don't care about Southwark, that's clear. It was also clear in the last government that Lib Dem government didn't care about Southwark either. Now you can say, Councillor Whitehead, that it's not about party politics, but it absolutely is about politics. It's about caring for your population and caring that everybody has the opportunity to do well. Now we, Labour, are making sure our investment goes to the people who need it. We're helping people into work. We're helping people find apprenticeships. We're helping people start businesses. We're helping businesses have affordable accommodation. We're lifting people out of poverty pay. We do those things because they matter. We do those things because they change people's lives. Your government took so much money out of our public services. Yes, Labour had to start doing some of that after a recession. We had a plan to start putting money back in again. When we left government, the economy was recovering. When you went into government, it went into a double-dip recession, the longest recession on record. We are still paying the price for that. Right now we're paying the price for that. We have seen the longest drop in wages since the Napoleonic Wars under the impact of the government that you were in and the current government. We've seen productivity fall in our businesses. We've seen our country, our borough, our people being left behind. Labour doesn't want that. We don't want that. We're a government, we are a party here in Southwark that care about everyone here. We believe that everyone should have opportunity, and we want to make that happen. We want more resource to do that, and we need a government to make that happen. But I am proud of what we're doing with the resource that we have and the difference that we are making with this budget.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. I call upon the leader, Councillor Peter John.
Follow that. We're okay. Well, Madam Mayor, I'm incredibly proud also that in the 10th year of austerity, this Labour Council is bringing forward a budget, as others have said, which demonstrates absolutely our Labour values. And Councillor Salmon, I hate to disappoint you, we're not running out of ideas. We've got more ideas than you could fit into the Labour Party, anyway, whatever. Free healthy school meals, free swim and gym. Those were things that we have done. But look what's in this budget. The Positive Futures Fund, actually investing in our young people to tackle the root causes of violent crime. The Pioneer Fund, of which you'll hear more in due course, but which will excite you, I am sure, Councillor Salmon. Free theatre tickets for all primary school children. Come on! How more comprehensive can you be in terms of looking after the most vulnerable in our society? Investing in our libraries, our continued funding of employment and apprenticeships. 5,500 people found jobs thanks to Southwark Council in the last 4 years, and we'll do more over this 4-year period. Investment in vulnerable children and adolescents who are facing mental health problems, £2 million. So we are using the money that we have, Madam Mayor, to deliver an ambitious programme to support the most vulnerable and to demonstrate our Labour values in our borough. You know, some of that we are funding through the London Business Rates pooling retention pilot, whatever it is called, £10 million. I think it's a great shame that the government is going to reduce the amount of money that we get next year from £10 million down to £5 million approximately. But and shame on the Tories yet again. And it's very interesting, isn't it, actually, that in the extra £1 billion that James Brokenshire announced in December, a disproportionate amount of that money went where? Where do you suppose it went? It went to the Shire counties. Those places in greatest need and hubs of deprivation, I do not think. It was the Tory government buying off Tory backbenchers. Shame upon them. So, Madam Mayor, we are investing for the future. We take crime absolutely seriously. That's why we've got an amendment which is putting more money. Councillor Salmon, we would have had some incredible foresight and knowledge about what exactly the Mayor was going to do. Nobody knew what the Mayor was going to do until last Thursday. So I don't know how we can produce an amendment about what we were going to do with the Police Plus scheme until last Thursday in any event. But we are investing in the police going forward. We're investing in our services. This is a Labour council which is ambitious for now, for the future, forever for our borough.
Call upon Councillor Graham Neill.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So we're agreed that the stature of local government has declined. Thank you. Has declined along with central government support. And maybe it's our fault as local councillors for failing to make the case to the wider population that higher taxes may produce a more equitable society. In any case, we are where we are. The UK electorate has voted for a low tax base, and we have to cut our cloth accordingly. Madam Mayor, let me bring your attention to that evergreen Southwark Life magazine, a free publication which costs the taxpayer here in Southwark £100,000 a year. Now, Madam Mayor, I took a poll among some Southwark residents, and although the sample may not be scientific, of the 13 people I asked, 100% thought that £100,000 could be better spent. Now, it might not be appropriate for me to make editorial suggestions for the magazine, but if the magazine is going to continue to be produced, I would like to see a feature on what former cabinet members in Southwark are spending their golden goodbye money on. Thank you. Perhaps we would then see a Southwark Life that would inform and be read, rather than simply used as a mechanism to prop up Southwark's recycling rate, which I think is declining. We are agreed then, Madam Mayor, that money is tight, and we must surely agree that £100,000 is a lot of money to spend. Maybe in the grand scheme of things, £100,000 doesn't make that big a difference to our finances. Madam Mayor, given the financial constraints which those of us, which we all face, all across Southwark, may I suggest, Madam Mayor, that we invest that £100,000 in protecting our young people from violent crime. Thank you.
Call upon Councillor Richard Livingston.
Thank you. I thought it was very interesting that the party opposite in moving Amendment A was saying they want to steer clear of party politics, and yet they've picked on things that they associate with the political leadership of the council. And come up with some very highly speculative other savings, although I did quite like Councillor Whitehead's suggestion that we rent out the Lib Dem members' room, which I think was what he was suggesting. I suspect their call for not for party politics is in the hope that people will ignore the fact that the 5 of the 9 years of austerity that have led to the police cuts, they were in government. And I don't think we should let them forget that. But I've done some maths, I'm afraid, to tell people. I look back at 2010, before austerity started, and then 72% of the council's funding came from government grants. Since that time, 63p in every pound of that money has been taken away from government, and that's before you even start to look at the impact of inflation and other demand pressures that have been created by austerity. Inflation alone is a further 28%. That is a real terms cut. If we hadn't been making the additional gains in council tax and business rates from regeneration of about 57% since 2010. 57% is what has gone for austerity. And I have to say that however government and that childless man, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, tried to portray this isn't alone in terms of finance for Southwark. I think it's also, though, worth saying that it doesn't feel like that in Southwark. I think the fact that it doesn't feel as if half our money has gone is a testament to the values of this council to protect people and their services to the end, particularly those people that are most vulnerable. But I also want to thank our council officers in their work for that. The many that have been involved in this, but I do want to pick out 2 in particular, because since my first budget back 8 years ago, the work that Eleanor Kelly and Duncan Whitfield have put in to the process to get this right and to ensure that those savings are as painless as possible has been absolutely exemplary, and I think we all owe them a great vote of thanks for that. In my role as Cabinet Member for Transport Manager, I'm proud of the fact that this sound financial stewardship means that we are the London Borough that spends the 3rd highest per kilometre on our highways. And it's why we win awards for our highways. As a resident of the recent Fulburn Square CPZ, I'm really glad that controlled parking zones have a positive impact that is improving the street stream, cutting congestion, improving air quality, and so I'm glad that this budget is enabling more of that to happen. I'm also glad to say that as a borough that has the best recycling rate in London, that we are continuing that. We're having to find some more money through garden waste, but it is going to be the lowest rate for those 2/3 of boroughs which charge for garden waste in London at only £30 a year. So I think we've made some very sensible choices here which are going to sustain some brilliant services in the council, and I commend this budget to the Chamber.
Thank you. Councillor Johnson City.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Firstly, I wanted to join colleagues and thank Councillor Mills and, of course, Strategic Director for Finance for all of your work in putting this together. As already been mentioned, it's Duncan's birthday tomorrow, and since it's a big one, I can only assume it's 21. And he's given up a night as a rock and roll star, although Section 151, as a Section 151 officer, it could be argued that tonight's a rock and roll night as well. Madam Mayor, like many colleagues, I decided to stand to improve the life chances of my friends, neighbours and fellow community members. I say this because it's always important to reflect that no one comes into local government to make the savings that we've had to over the last 9 years. In the words of the LGA Labour Group, it's forced many councils like ours to breaking point. It has been said before, but I'll repeat it again. Due to a politically motivated austerity agenda from this Tory government, this council has lost 63 pence in every pound. And this has meant we've had to take tough decisions. It has required us to spend every pound as if it was our own. But have we allowed this to limit our ambition to build a borough that ensures that every child born has the best possible chance to succeed? The answer is unequivocally no. We've got the basics right, we've kept our libraries open, our bins collected, and our parks open. Our Carbon Capital programme has seen new schools delivered, new libraries open, and improved parks. Tonight's budget makes difficult choices and also commits to funding one of our biggest challenges facing the borough, tackling the scourge of knife crime. Work led by my colleague Councillor Okoto will see an introduction of the Positive Futures Fund, and the Labour amendment will see an additional funding go into community safety. The big question is, how have we been able to do this? As mentioned, we've been prudent, but there are other figures not often talked about, but just as vital in the ability to keep our services going. Because of the growth plans and the growth in council tax, we've seen additional 32.2 million in council tax income as compared to the budget in 2010-2011. Since 2014-2015, the council has been able to retain 30% of its growth in business rates income above baseline. This is around 25 million. To put this into context, that figure in the 2010 to 2011 budget was zero. Has this been accidental? No. This has been part of our growth plans. Plans that are primarily about delivering the new affordable homes, the new generally affordable workspace to ensure a child born in our borough today has the best possible chance to succeed. But it's also bolstered income generated from council tax and increased retained business rate.
Please.
So today, I join colleagues in recommending a budget that balances the books and keeps frontline services going. Thank you.
Thank you. Call upon Councillor Maria Linford Hall.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The last time we were all here at Council Assembly, one of the things that we discussed was who we as councillors and as a Council Assembly should respond to the rapidly rising in knife attacks that our borough has endured. In the very minute that we were speaking, yet another of one of the residents was stabbed to death. These stabbings and attacks are still shocking us, but sadly, they are no longer surprising. We know their number have dramatically increased in the last few years. Tragically, we also know that it's almost guaranteed that there will be Southwark residents walking around alive and well today that will be killed in knife attacks. Over the last few years, Southwark has either been near or the top or near the top for the number of knife attacks in London. All of us hear now that it is a complex problem. It is a problem that requires a lot of different strategies and strands of society to pull together. No one disputes that. It will be downright false for anyone in either party to claim otherwise. However, the issue before us today with this non-party political amendment is whether the dedicated knife crime unit will contribute towards a solution. It is clear that the reduction in police officers has made the situation worse. For the last few years, Southwark has been losing police every week. These reductions have made things worse, not just in terms of sheer numbers, but in the nature of policing in Southwark. Has a stretch policing to the point that is overwhelmingly become a reactive policy force, lacking the time and resources to proactively prevent crime from occurring. It is precisely this trend that dedicated knife crime unit will be designated to counter. Such a unit, staffed by police officers, tasked especially to undertake long-term investigations, surveillance and intelligence gathering operations, will be able to focus relentlessly on this issue. The benefits of having such a unit does not end there. The knife crime unit will take a load of that existing police officers currently on their shoulder. This in turn will free up time and resources to counter other crimes that have risen over recent years, whether that's human trafficking, forced prostitution or domestic violence.
Please conclude.
Having more police officers will mean that more crimes can identify, process, punish, deter and prevent it. Tonight, all of us can leave this building and can honestly say that we took a stand together against knife crime. We take a meaningful step towards creating a safer, a stronger Southwark. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Lincoln. Now call Councillor Rebecca Lurie.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm delighted to be able to be part of the team that's presenting the budget this evening. Some might say it's been a really dispiriting process, considering every area in which we spend our resources in the face of further government cuts. But what we have once again delivered is an ambitious programme delivering a fairer future for our residents. I want to start with our commitments around libraries. Libraries, as far as I am concerned, are magical places. I want all of our residents to be proud of our libraries, not to think of them as just places to borrow books, but also to access council services, to have a quiet place to study and to work, and to participate in community activities. So far this year, we've opened the new Grove Vale Library, and we've announced the new Walworth Library and Heritage Centre, delivering a new library on the Walworth Road. As many of you will know, our initial proposals for this budget considered amendments to the opening hours of our libraries, and it's a testament to the work of officers and fellow councillors that we've been able to ring-fence money for the coming 4 years that means we can maintain our opening hours at their current levels. Moving on to parks. In the centre of London, access to green space is particularly important, especially to so many of our residents who do not have the luxury of their own back garden. Their garden is their park. Life chances are improved considerably by access to these spaces. We pride ourselves on our parks and green spaces in the borough and continue to invest in them. It's why we've opened Peckham Rye Playground and Leighton Square earlier this year, alongside the new Mint Street Adventure Playground. And it's why we have further committed resources to investment into adventure playgrounds across the rest of the borough. We want to maintain this investment going forward. We have a record number of green flags, and we want to ensure our current parks and green spaces maintain this standard, and that our future parks and green spaces live up to this as well. Alongside providing spaces for outdoor recreation, we want to ensure that our residents have access to the best indoor recreational facilities. That's why we're extending our successful free swimming gym policy to make it more flexible and introducing free swimming lessons for all our residents. We want to be exceptional as a borough in the services that we are offering to our residents to keep them fit and healthy. On to culture, where we have delivered over 1,000 cultural events this year alone, celebrating the diversity of our borough and capitalising on the huge cultural institutions at our fingertips is a priority. It's why we're giving every primary school child a free trip to the theatre. And alongside this, we want to realise our ambition for a creative enterprise zone, at first in Camberwell and Peckham, but then across the whole borough. And finally, to our communities. Communities are what make Southwark. This is about ensuring we have the resources going to the right places and helping the community to access council support when they need to. It's why we continue to invest in advice services, both externally and our own, to provide the support that our residents need. This budget exemplifies why Southwark is a brilliant borough, and I look forward to delivering on our proposals over the coming year.
Thank you, Councillor Lurie. I now call upon Councillor Jack Book.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you to Cabinet members and, importantly, officers for going through the gruelling process of putting this budget together in what we know are difficult times. I want to start by saying there are some parts of this budget that make me uncomfortable. As a socialist, there are policies within it that don't sit well with my values. And when I talk to my neighbours, friends and constituents, and when I look them in the eye, I have to be honest. We have to be honest. That not everything is as we would wish it to be. But these are difficult times. As Peter has said, time and time again, 63 pence of every pound in government grant has been cut from this council. The austerity agenda of Conservative and Liberal elements of our society is causing a crisis for local government. And when we talk about the impact of those cuts, it's not our lives as councillors that are made difficult. The difficult decisions we have to make don't really matter at all. What matters is the 63 pence of every pound gone that was spent making our community safer, fairer and more equal. We must be unequivocal in our condemnation of every party that has played a role in the damaging austerity facing Southwark. So, Madam Mayor, in these difficult times, our principles are the things that matter most. The people we've decided to fight for, the values prioritised in our decisions. And in that, we have things to be proud of. I'm proud that in this time of xenophobia and racism, as the power of the state is wielded against migrants and refugees, that we at Southwark Council have committed to ending the hostile environment in our borough, no matter the cost. So if you're a migrant in Southwark, if you're worried about your status, I want to say this. This council welcomes you. Southwark is your home, as it is ours. I'm proud that as the crisis of mental ill health in our young people grows and underfunding of the NHS continues, that we have made the historic commitment to treat every child who needs us. In Southwark, there is no child left behind. And I'm proud that this council is showing its commitment to our estate communities, such as those on the Aylesbury that I represent, who have faced decades of disruption and poor living conditions, by releasing funds for maintenance, repair on our district heating systems and other areas, with £500,000 spent on the Aylesbury alone. With these pledges and more, Madam Mayor, we can be proud of the battle the Labour Party in office are choosing to fight. So no, we're not building Jerusalem here in Southwark, but Southwark Labour is and always will be on the side of the many in the face of the few. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll call upon Councillor Damien O'Brien.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, it continues to baffle me as to why senior executives in Southwark Council are offered vehicle lease incentives as part of their packages. Now, I do understand that current agreements have to be honoured. You're right, Eleanor. But going forward, is it really the case that we cannot recruit talented senior execs without the incentive? We've all met with the members of the exec team. Their motivation for choosing to come to Southwark is clearly based on the fact that Southwark is a diverse and exciting yet challenging borough. They want to come here because they want to be part of our success, and Southwark offers a career-defining opportunity to be successful. Can you imagine a senior team member sitting at home thinking, well, I've got an offer from Southwark, but I've also got an offer from Kensington and Chelsea. I think I'll punt for Southwark because they're offering a car lease incentive. I mean, seriously. The MP expenses scandal should have taught everybody the stark lesson that transparency of payment arrangements for public servants is essential. The public don't want pay deals that go into the shady world of sideline attractions. They want people to be told what they will be paid and let them figure out how to spend it. And if it means paying a bit more tax, then all the better. The vehicle lease bung makes no sense. Will senior executives use these vehicles to commute to work? Well, of course not. There's nowhere to park, for one thing. An issue I've worked with was to expand the exclusion zone for staff parking. I'm pleased to report that that was successful. It's not right for staff to take up estate parking bays anymore, and this action, along with the implementation of new controlled parking zones, has meant some staff no longer drive in at all. Another reason why senior executives don't drive to work is that Tooley Street has a public transport access level of 6B. This means that this building has the highest possible level of access to public transport in England. Who needs the grief of driving in and out of inner London and possibly having to pay the congestion charge when you have access links to public transport like we do? In addition, for some time the planning rules have stated that, apart from a small number of disabled parking bays, new developments should not provide parking bays. We are actively discouraging the use of private vehicles in the borough for very good congestion, air quality and health reasons, and the Liberal Democrats support this. So why is Southwark Labour actively encouraging car use for its senior executives? This seems to be a very clear case of non-cab rank hypocrisy on the part of Southwark Labour. Madam Mayor, we need to end this elitist practice of executive car leases and return what would be spent on them to frontline services. When we need this, we need it now. Why do we need it? To benefit the many, not the few. It's time... I had to get that in. It's time, Labour. It's time, Labour, stop saying one thing and doing the opposite. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Now call upon Councillor Stephanie Cryan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So over the last 9 years, we've seen rough sleeping and homelessness increase year on year. And actually, as a council, we have been at the forefront of prevention and responding to that crisis. As Councillor Mills mentioned, recently we secured £615,000 worth of government money to actually address the rough sleeping crisis. And how does that money spent? Well, we have a Housing First project that supports former rough sleepers to ensure they don't return to living on the streets. It gives them secure accommodation. We have a nurse embedded in the outreach service to ensure that our rough sleepers get the medical care and support they need to help them then sustain a tenancy. And we have an officer from Southwark Women's Aid to work with women living on the streets, and we've also just partnered up with them to help women just leaving prison to secure a roof over their head when they leave prison so they don't end up on the streets. We have local support officers providing support for former rough sleepers to sustain that tenancy and remain in their homes. And we've also used some of that funding to secure bed and breakfast accommodation and working on pathways to get people back into accommodation. We have 47 rough sleepers at the last count in Southwark, an increase of 3 on the last year. That's 47 too many. But I also want to touch on the fact that there were 163 people that we prevented from sleeping rough last year as well. So we are doing absolutely amazing work around that. And our aim is to try and eliminate rough sleeping. And the way to do this is by getting people away from sleeping on the streets and into accommodation. And I applaud you for looking at rough sleeping, but I don't think the idea of a hub, a place where maybe you may be able to get a cup of coffee and TV, is not the way to actually eliminate rough sleeping. The way to eliminate rough sleeping is to work to get people into accommodation. I don't think there's no other way to address that than fundamentally working to eliminate rough sleeping. Our rough sleeping, our homelessness team, are award-winning. They set the standard across the country. Other local authorities come to us to get the training they need to actually implement the systems that we use. And I want to pay particular tribute to Ian Swift and his team. Ian works tirelessly in our homelessness service and has been awarded with an MBE for doing that. We have a team that are absolutely committed. And I'm proud to be the cabinet member who has that team working for me and actually working around that. I'm also proud of our homelessness strategy, of which rough sleeping is one of the 5 pillars of that. But I don't think we can talk about homelessness without also talking about the growing increase on temporary accommodation. And I'm really grateful to Councillor Mills for looking at the fact that we are going to be putting an extra £3.2 million into the budget this year, a commitment to actually cover the increasing costs of temporary accommodation. We have girls and boys living in unsecure accommodation. They don't, without permanent accommodation. And we need to tackle that as well. I'm running out of time, but the main cause of homelessness, we all know, is austerity. It's austerity, it's universal credit, it's the Lib Dem and Tory welfare reform policy that is leading to this problem and continues to lead to this problem. It is Lib Dem and Tory policies that are getting us to where we are now. We are now only seeing the effects of policies from 4 years ago, and it is shameful.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Evelyn Akoto.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We started the financial year like many others before it, from a position of great concern of what it holds for our communities. This is the 10th consecutive year of funding cuts, and like many years before it, we sought to protect the most vulnerable in our community. But in every financial struggle, there comes a point where you cannot hold the pieces together anymore. So we began our budget challenge with the realization that we will have to take a lot of serious and tough decisions. And as this was my first budget challenge as a cabinet member, I was greatly concerned about the decision ahead of us, especially for my community safety brief. But I went into a budget challenge with senior officers and cabinet colleagues who, like me, had a sheer determination to find ways to protect the most vulnerable in our community. So, the community safety budget was protected, and instead of the loss I feared we would have, we saw a huge growth. As previously announced, we have committed $500,000 to the Positive Futures Fund, a key manifesto pledge. We will invest in an analyst to support the Council's work on crime prevention and reducing youth crime and youth violence. The Met Patrol Plus scheme has stopped in its current form due to lack of resources and police numbers. The new proposal will see our current numbers reduce. And so we have therefore committed to ensure we add extra funding to maintain current levels of policing in the nighttime economy. But as usual, the Lib Dem answer is simply to spend money on purchasing police. In their amendment, they stated that this is what taxpayer wanted. I disagree. What taxpayer want is for us to find a lasting solution to this problem and not just invest in plastering the wound. They want money spent on the root causes of violence, money on early intervention, preventative initiative, expanding the support for parents, work on a lasting strategy to support violence. And I recommend that you spend time with communities who are affected by knife crime to see exactly what they want, because what you're proposing right now, it is not the solution to it. And so I say to you, what we are doing is actually what taxpayers want and deserve. So today we put before you a budget proposal that is both prudent and balanced, one that will maximize every penny of the taxpayers' money to invest, protect, and support our community. And so I recommend this budget to you all.
Thank you, and I'll call Councillor Hamara Ali.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I recently went on shift with my Safer Neighbourhood team, and what I saw and heard was both interesting and incredibly disturbing. And we've heard many things this evening of similar ilk, but of course the increase in rough sleepers, those eyes that have seen things that they should not have seen just because they are on the streets, and some of whom are drug users, the increase or the reintroduction of heroin in the area, needles left in bushes and sometimes out in the open, beggars, some of whom clearly are not beggars but are in the grip of trafficking gangs, and increased antisocial behaviour to the point where people are now not feeling safe in their own homes. We now have pockets of lawlessness in our community and exacerbated officers. Our team used to have 9 officers and they now have 2. They have equipment that's not fit for purpose and they're often running on goodwill and passion for the cause. How many ways can we ask them to stretch themselves and still get the same level of service? And whilst we must continue to demand better from the Mayor and from the government on policing, our constituents don't even log calls with the police anymore because they don't feel they get the service, which means that we're now not getting the intelligence that we require to proactively start to nip things in the bud. So how do we fund this? Because this is the cry that always comes from the opposition benches, and it's time to look at ourselves. So as part of our package, we're saying good governance doesn't require an army of people. Research shows that strong leadership in most organisations running multi-billion-pound budgets in corporate and regulated organisations have maybe a maximum of 7 or 8 people. And the effectiveness of decision-making authority is often reduced by 10% per additional board member. Southwark has a cabinet of 10 plus 3 deputies, and additionally we have 19 SRA roles. With confusion often about who's doing what, it's clear that this latest cabinet has been designed to keep members busy tripping over each other rather than holding their leader to account and not focusing on delivering a strategy for the people of Southwark. I encourage all members to vote for all amendments this evening, to remove these superfluous deputy cabinet roles, to move back to an effective number of cabinet members and to reduce SRA allowances in line with the increase in council tax. And of course, the removal of the unethical golden goodbyes, because our constituents deserve better. And whilst we agree that investing in the root causes of knife, gun and gang crime is very important, our young people need support and backup from that vital community resource, our police. And our communities need to be able to share information safely to allow the police to become proactive, to stop this slide into lawlessness.
Thank you. Now call upon Councillor Sunny Lamb.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you to the Cabinet member, and congratulations with your first budget. I've heard so much tonight about knife crime, rough sleepers, and how much we should spend. I didn't even realize the Lib Dem have now got the money tree, because I heard you want to, Councillor Neill wants to spend 100,000, and also I hear Williams, Councillor Williams, Congo wants to spend 1 million pounds on only God knows crime and so on. But have you guys forgotten where we started from? This thing didn't start just yesterday. It started in 2011 when you went in bed with the Tories. have you forgotten since 2010 when you were in bed then, and in 2011 when we had the London riot? So there's nothing new about all these, youth crime we witnessing today, because it started not yesterday, not last year, not only this budget cycle, but from 2010, when we made the wrong choice of joining the Tory government. And since then, how much have we had? We have over 50% of our funding, of our funding core, which is equivalent to about, I think it's about maybe around 50 million pounds lost over that period. Now, that's why I ask you, if you want to spend all this money, obviously there must be money tree somewhere. Because you haven't even told us where you're going to raise the money from to spend 1 million on this, 100,000 pounds on that. And I commend my colleague, Councillor Mills, for her stewardship, for even finding money to put on positive future funds, which obviously is something that's going to help some of our young people to experiment in any area of their interest, whether they want to start a small business or enterprise, even something for the community. So therefore, I commend this budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gavin Edwards.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. There's been some really good positive speeches tonight from Labour councillors, but I'm afraid I'm going to dedicate my speech to rebutting some of the sillier points made by Liberal Democrat councillors, in particular the initial speech made by Councillor Salmon. Councillor Salmon bemoaned the lack of explanation for proposed cuts being considered. Why are such proposals being considered, she asked. Well, let me explain. The core reason for having to still propose reductions in services is the vicious austerity programme which was started by your party. And you must not forget that. Councillor Neill says we are where we are. No, we are where you put us. That's what's happened. Councillor Salmon says we're set, the councillor, Liberal Democrat councillors are setting the budget. Well, no, we're still going by...
Point of personal explanation.
Point of personal explanation.
Yes, my point is indeed that we are where we are. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Very gracious of you. Councillor Gavin Edwards.
Thank you very much, Councillor Neill. So, Councillor Simon says we're setting the agenda. We're still going by the agenda of Nick Clegg and Tim Farron and Simon Hughes. Anybody remember them? So, I also want to comment, because the word laziness was used, I want to comment on the absence of a full alternative budget from the opposition as well. Though I may have disagreed with much of what was in previous alternative budgets, I did respect the fact that the hard work was put in by the opposition in order to bother to put that together. Councillor Salmon talks about laziness, but let's not forget that the opposition councillors have responsibilities too, and people in glass houses should not throw stones. As for the supposed perks that we've heard referred to, has Councillor Salmon forgotten the astronomical increases in allowances which were introduced under the Lib Dem Tory administration in this borough, of which she was also voted for? Has she forgotten that Labour has made massive reductions to those SRAs as well? The point has been well made on rough sleeping, that there's been really good work happening in this borough, and that it's important that we don't replicate some of that work. But I'm sorry to say that I am in no way convinced by the crocodile tears of Liberal Democrat councillors over the issue of rough sleeping. Where were they when the bedroom tax was being introduced? Where were they when the Lib Dems and Tories were decimating the ability of councils to build new affordable and council homes? My reflections on all of this is that the Labour group and Southwark's Labour Cabinet is tonight setting a sensible, prudent but overtly political budget which reflects our Labour values, a budget for equality and fairness. On the other hand, the amendments put down by the Liberal Democrats show that they are not only are they not a credible alternative administration in this borough, they are not even an adequate opposition. Thank you.
Call upon Councillor Adele Morris.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So, Councillor Lamb was saying, oh, how are the Lib Dems going to pay for all this? Well, I can give you a bit of an idea, something positive. A roof over every head. That's the message in tonight's amendment from the Lib Dems. And we have got a creative solution to fund support services for rough sleepers. We believe that many of those who can afford to stay in expensive hotel rooms would be willing to contribute £1 a night towards supporting those who do not have a room at all. Marriott International have been using such a scheme since 1995, with guests being invited to add $1 to their bill on checkout as a donation to UNICEF, and they have raised millions through this scheme over the years. Closer to home, and talking about slightly less than millions, Hackney Council, Labour Borough, has introduced a voluntary scheme where money collected is used to support the Hackney Community Fund. Councillor Al-Samurai and I have spoken to hotels in our wards who were supportive of this idea. And we are lucky, actually, that we've got some hotels that already take their corporate social responsibility seriously and already work with our communities. And we think that with, well, actually, I'm not sure how, I was trying to find out how many hotel bed spaces we've got now, but in 2015 it was just under 6,000. And the Mayor of London has demanded that we keep building hotels in Southwark as well, and hotel rooms. And since a lot of them are high-end, we think that that current and proposed expansion has got the potential to bring in funding to support those people who are less fortunate. We hope you voted against one hotel, if that's what you're saying, Peter. It was in the wrong place. We have had a significant amount of high-end hotels which have been approved and have been built or are being built in the borough. I hope you will support our amendment and our proposal to introduce a voluntary contribution scheme, because hotels are willing to implement it, so let's hope that you support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Call upon Councillor Charlie Smith.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I too would like to congratulate Councillor Mills on the marvellous job that she has done bringing this report here tonight. I know she's had to work under extremely poor, difficult conditions to juggle this budget, and I think, to be honest with you, Councillor, I think you're a star. But I'd like to move on, though, on policing. As Councillor Simmons has already said, police numbers have been cut. I'm not sure where you're going to find all these police officers from. Is there a magic cupboard? You open the door and there's loads of coppers in there. You go, come on. You know, what about recruitment? What about training? How long does this take? You've got to give them, you know, proper contracts, salaries, and anyway. So that won't happen, I'll be honest with you. Right. The other thing is on rough sleeping. Now, I don't think anybody in this room would disagree that it's gone on too long, it's got too much. But it's only a Labour government, not a Lib Dem crowd, a Labour government that's going to change things. In a few weeks' time, we may have a general election, and we'll see a Labour government in power. And one of the things we will do will be to reform the private rented sector, which we must do with some urgency, and give people some kind of security, especially people off the streets. That's half the battle, you know. Landlords go, we don't want you here, here's a notice, off you jolly well go. And where do you go? There's nothing to be found. Well, at least we're starting to build some council housing. And lastly, and I've said this before, on Southwark Life, I look forward to Southwark Life coming through my letterbox, because it's the only way I know what Peter John is up to. So, thank you, Madam Mayor.
And of course, it also contains full details of the Civic Awards each year as well. I now call upon Councillor Paul Fleming.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is the 5th budget which I've been part of setting as a councillor, and indeed it is the 5th disappointing budget that I've been part of setting. But that is almost inevitable, as it sits in that ideological context, that choice of austerity, and an ideological context pushed since 2010 by the Liberals opposite, precisely because it is the ideological context of market and social liberalism that they stand with and for. But whatever its failings, this budget contains the practical and pragmatic tools to challenge and protect the many of our residents, and not the few. Although liberalism, for its many faults, does have a use time and again, Liberals do identify the right problems, but miss the correct and radical answers. Because here our imperfect budget tackles squalor with providing best protections for temporary accommodation residents, where Faraday, my ward, houses the most, dealing with ignorance by tackling our library, with standing up and opening new libraries at longer hours than intended, tackling want by continuing our free healthy school meals programme without the stigma, tackling idleness with our theatre tickets programme, not only getting young people into theatres but showing them the diverse unionised careers they can have both front and back of stage if they participate, and dealing with disease, continuing investment in our parks and tackling poor air quality and looking to expand our gym and swim use. And of course these 5 evils identified by a Liberal in 1945 were tackled then by a Socialist Labour government and will be tackled now by a Socialist Labour in Southwark and a Socialist Labour in Westminster. And that is a Socialist Labour Party that relies on shifting that context, not relying on notions of evidence and aspic of a failed economic model or rearranging the deck chairs on an ideological Titanic. Councillors, comrades, 101 years ago today, if you're Liberal with the Julian calendar, Imperial Russian forces, defenders of the establishment of the failed regime, came to their consciences and joined the workers in the first stage of revolution in Russia. Now, this was the vanguard of a failed regime, and it is my hope that those Liberals opposite, the vanguard of this failed regime, may too come to their consciences in the fight for a borough run for the workers, and will speed across this aisle bare-breasted, inspired by the phenomenal oratory of Councillors O'Brien and Whitehead, to grab this budget as the inadequate tool that it is to tackle head-on the broken economic and political social regime. So join us with standing up to austerity, not just for the future, but now, with one glorious party, one glorious borough, for the many and not for the few.
Now call upon Councillor Nick Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. May I begin by congratulating Councillor Buck on his maiden speech. It happens to be my maiden speech too. Hey! I'd like to begin by actually taking a moment to thank the residents of Surrey Docks who were kind enough to place their trust in me. I can only say I will do my best. I had hoped that my maiden speech would be at the last Council Assembly. I'd written a really barnstorming speech about the people's vote on Brexit. We ran out of time, so unfortunately my barnstorming speech tonight will be about cutting unnecessary PR. Hopefully it will be as engaging. I've sought to find something that everybody in this room could agree with and nod and say, yep, that's fair, that's true. I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but we've got bugger all money. We've seen it in the graph. Where is it? I mean, it's going one way. It's clearly not going to start magically going up anytime soon. That leaves us all in an environment where things that would once have seemed like really sensible uses of money maybe now start to look like not so sensible, perhaps even extravagant. We've gone through the communications department. We've looked at, well, is there anything that could be done there? And we believe there is. There's about £200,000 of expenditure which we think could be saved. How do you do that? Well, this is the horrible bit, the nasty bit. It's removing 3 media officers and 2 marketing officers. I know, I said it wasn't nice. These are people's jobs, people's lives. I'm sure they do excellent, excellent work. It's also looking at the use of external software solutions. You put that together, you get £201,000. As I said, we all have to make ugly and horrible choices. It's the environment that we find ourselves in. £201,000 is a lot of money. I don't really care if you spend it on police officers, if you spend it on education, just spend it on something in a frontline capacity, because clearly we need it. We don't have the luxury of not spending it. I suspect that when the people opposite, the councillors opposite, look at the suggestions we have made, the temptation will be to go, no, rubbish, I'm not going to agree or support any of those ideas. I would urge you to consider, at least consider some of them. We live in an environment with no money. We need to find ways of maximising that money. If you don't want to adopt one of our ideas now, you could always nick them and put them in next year's budget. Thank you.
For Councillor Anoud Al-Samarai.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor, and thank you very much to Duncan and all of his team for their assistance with the opposition budget this evening. Thank you and happy birthday. It's very good, and just to remind you all that it's been signed off by the Finance Officer as legal, implementable and balanced. I was excited because I thought we were entering a new kind of politics, and Councillor Fleming, I think it was members of your party who were leaving, not necessarily bare-breasted, but certainly leaving. And it was because they were finally putting principle before party. And I really hope that this evening we might see some of that happening. I think that what we're putting forward is two very sensible amendments. They don't go against Labour Party policy or ideology. They're actually saying, here's some really sensible ways of saving some money, and God, aren't there priorities that we've got of police officers and helping rough sleepers? Isn't that what we should be funding? And so I hope you will listen. We've heard that you do eventually listen to us secretly on the late night levy, on plastic cups, on youth services, on empty homes, on libraries. It took you 2 days to listen to us. So I was really hoping this evening you might listen to us straight away and vote for our amendments. And I'm still hoping you will. We have had this evening the usual Lib Dem bashing. And do you know what? I can't actually control our national party in much the same way that I don't think any of you can control yours. Or I hope you're not the ones in charge of the current fiasco of serious bullying and anti-Semitism that you can't control, and I don't think any of you in this chamber should take the blame for. I also have never stood up here and blamed any of you for the Iraq war, or for top-up fees, or for the gap between rich and poor getting wider, or for unregulating the banks so they could do whatever the hell they wanted. I've never done that because, do you know what? I think it's about local choices. And the local choices that we've got before us this evening aren't about government bashing. They're actually about what's right for the community here in Southwark. And do you know what's right? It's saying, let's stop Southwark Life. Let's stop press officers. We're not wedded to deputy cabinet members and golden goodbyes. Let's use that money, please, for police officers, as my colleague Councillor Hamburg said, that might actually save a life. Councillor Mills thinks that it's too difficult, that the police might say no to £1 million because it's too hard to recruit police officers. Let's give them the £1 million and see what they say. Or the private sector landlord scheme and the tourist taxes too. We couldn't do it quickly enough. Well, I tell you what, let's try. Let's get on with it. Let's show some ambition. And Councillor Klein seems to have misunderstood completely what St Mungo's have asked for, which is a shelter where no questions are asked, where people who are really stuck on the streets get housed and then supported. That's not duplication. That's filling a gap that is desperately needed that we've been asked for. There is something seriously wrong at the moment in this borough with crime and rough sleeping. These amendments seek to solve it. Please put your principles before your party line and vote with us.
Thank you. I now call on Councillor Vicky Mills to reply.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. This is not the budget of a tired administration. This is passionate, it's heartfelt, it's ambitious, it's about radical new ideas, not just statutory services. It's saying if you find yourself in tough times, we are going to be there with you. The only thing that I am tired of is the failure of colleagues opposite to acknowledge the role that they have played in driving our services to this place. On police money, an absolute assurance that if there is any additional money in our budget and in our amendment, it will go towards policing and to community safety. On comms engagement, on our press office, on Southwark Life, I've spent the last 9 years being told that we don't do consultation engagement and communications well enough, and now I'm being told we should do even less. I sat with Councillor Noakes, Councillor Linford Hall, and talked about how we reached out to our EU residents here, and in the next the edition of Southwark Life, there will be information about Brexit directly aimed at those EU residents. You've challenged us about us changing and listening. I mean, I can write the budget in September. I cannot speak to anybody in here. You cannot have your amendment. I cannot change my mind. We could not have council assembly. But that is not how I want to set a budget. When this is a 6-month, 12-month process, and we should listen and we should change. But I do want to wrap up by saying, you can keep shouting at us if you want to, but I think what you need to do is choose about how you want to be councillors and how you want to engage in this process. Anu, the last time you emailed me was 3 years ago. Adele, I think the last time we spoke, you're speaking to hotels, but the last time we spoke was when we sat on planning together 6 years ago. We have got to have that engagement. You can be totally disconnected from services like Housing First that are doing the work that you are asking for in your amendment, or you can roll up your sleeves. You can face the challenges head on that we are having to do that. You can stay up all night with us as we think about the difficult decisions that we need to make. And I really thank my Labour colleagues for the absolute solidarity they have shown myself and Cabinet colleagues through this process. You have stayed up with us and you have contributed to the big ideas that we need to face the challenges of the next 4, 10, 20 years. So, this is about a Labour budget, it is about solidarity, it's about Labour together, Labour stronger together, and I commend you to vote for this budget this evening.
We shall now vote on the amendments. The vote on Amendment A. Those in favour of Amendment A? (14). Those against? (48). Any abstentions? No. The Amendment A is lost. Vote on Amendment B. Those in favour of Amendment B? 14. Those against? 48. Any abstentions? None. Amendment B is lost. The vote on Amendment C. Those in favour of Amendment C? Unanimous. No against and no abstentions. Amendment C is carried. We shall now carry out the procedure for taking a recorded vote on the substantive motion. The bell will be rung at the beginning and end of 1 minute, after which the doors to the room will be closed. I will advise all members to remain in their seats. has been rung and the doors to the meeting have been closed. I shall now move to the vote on the substantive motion. I shall ask the clerk to call, I'll call the names of the clerk will call the names of all the members present in alphabetical order, and each member present shall declare if they are for, against, or abstain.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councillor Evelyn Akoto. Yeah. Do you mind if you stand when you answer? Because I don't think the mics are working. Four. Councillor Humari Ali.
Abstain.
Councillor Jasmine Ali. 4. Councillor Anud Al-Samarai.
Abstain.
Councillor Peter Babudu.
4.
Councillor Maggie Browning. Councillor Jack Brooke. Councillor Rhoda Burgess. Councillor Victor Chamberlain. Councillor Sunil Chopra. Councillor James Caldwell. Councillor Stephanie Cryan. Councillor Helen Dennis. 4. Councillor Dora Dixon, 5. 4. Councillor Nick Dolizal. 4. Councillor Carl Easton.
4.
Councillor Gavin Edwards.
4.
Councillor Paul Fleming.
4.
Councillor Tom Flynn.
4.
Councillor Renata Hamvers. 4. Councillor Barry Hargrove. Councillor John Hartley.
4.
Councillor William Haumbo. Councillor Sirajul Islam. 4. Councillor Peter John. 4. Councillor Nick Johnson.
Abstain.
Councillor Elena Kesley. Councillor Sarah King. Councillor Sonny Lamb. 4. Councillor Lorraine Lauder. 4. Councillor Richard Lehman.
4.
Councillor Maria Limford Hall.
Abstain.
Councillor Richard Livingstone. Councillor Rebecca Lowry. 4. Councillor Alice MacDonald. 4. Councillor Eliza Mann. Abstain. Councillor James Makash. Councillor Hamish McCallum.
Abstain.
Councillor Darren Merrill.
4.
Councillor Vicky Mills. 4. Councillor Adele Morris. Councillor Graham Neill. Councillor Maggie Newens. Councillor David Noakes.
Abstain.
Councillor Damian O'Brien. Councillor Jason Ochere. Councillor Victoria Olisa.
4.
Councillor Leo Pollack.
4.
Councillor Sandra Rule.
4.
Councillor Catherine Rose, Madam Mayor. 4. Councillor Jane Salmon.
Abstain.
Councillor Martin Seaton. 4. Councillor Andy Simmons.
4.
Councillor Johnson C2.
4.
Councillor Michael C2.
4.
Councillor Charlie Smith. 4. Councillor Cleo Soames. 4. Councillor Leanne Winner. 4. Councillor Dan Whitehead. Councillor Whittam. Councillor Bill Williams is absent. Councillor Kieran Williams. 4. Councillor Ian Wingfield.
4.
Thank you, madam. Give you the totals.
I will now announce the vote on the substantive recommendation. Those in favour of the substantive?
48, Madam Mayor.
48. Those against?
No.
Abstentions?
14.
14. The substantive is carried. I will ask the clerk to come in at this point.
The report was carried out only with an amendment. So in accordance with the Budget and Policy Framework, Rule 2G, the Cabinet recommendation has been amended and this is treated as an in-principle decision. It will be implemented after 7 days unless the leader provides written notice that he objects within 5 days of the decision, or the leader can confirm his agreement at this meeting, and the decision can be implemented with immediate effect.
Councillor Peter John, do you agree to the change recommendation?
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
We're now on to item 2.2, Capital Strategy and Treasury Management Strategy 2019 to 2020. The Cabinet Member for Finance, Performance and Brexit will present the report. Councillor Vicky Mills, you have 5 minutes in which to speak.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think I've done a lot of speaking this evening, and we did receive a Treasury Management report, I think, just at our last Council Assembly. So I just want to particularly draw members' attentions to paragraphs 34, 35 and 36. I think, you know, over the last few years, we talked about needing to borrow to finance our capital programme. We said we were going to do that. When I was here, I think in November or December, I said, yes, we're definitely about to do that. And these paragraphs confirm that that has now happened. So during December 2018, we borrowed 76 million from the Public Works Loan Board. And the projections for our capital expenditure are set out in the capital refresh that we're going to take shortly, and indicates that we'll need an additional borrowing requirement of 250 million by the 31st of March 2020. So I think that just means it's really incumbent on us that if we are borrowing money, we are doing that to make the, you know, absolutely to invest in our communities, to make that transformational change, and to kind of generate that return within our residents. And that when we are kind of making capital plans, that we are keeping to time. So it's really just to highlight that change.
There are no amendments to this report. Does any member wish to speak on the report? Thank you. We shall now move to vote on the recommendations. Item 2.2, vote on report recommendations. Those in favour? Unanimous. Thank you. The substantive is carried. Item 2.3, setting the council tax 2019 to 2020. I shall ask the clerk to come in at this point.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Council Assembly has agreed the level of council tax for 2019-20. This is set out in the Cabinet's recommendation as agreed in the substantive motion on item 2.1 as amended by Amendment C. Please note that as well as that it was agreed in the programme motion, that recommendation 2 is amended to refer to Appendix A rather than Appendix B. Thank you.
We shall now carry out the procedure for taking a recorded vote. The bell will be rung at the beginning and end of 1 minute, after which the doors to the room will be closed. I advise all members to remain in their seats. The bell has been rung and the doors to the meeting have been closed. I shall now move to the vote on the substantive motion. I shall ask the clerk to call the names of all members in alphabetical order, and each member present shall declare if they are for, against or abstain.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councillor Evelyn Akoto.
For.
Councillor Humeri Ali. For. Councillor Jasmine Ali. For. Councillor Anud Al Samarai. For. Councillor Peter Babudu.
For.
Councillor Margie Browning. Councillor Jack Buck.
For.
Councillor Rhoda Burgess. Councillor Victor Chamberlain. Councillor Sunil Chopra.
For.
Councillor James Caldwell.
For.
Councillor Stephanie Cryan. Councillor Helen Dennis. Councillor Dora Dixon Fowle. Councillor Nick Dolizal.
For.
Councillor Carl Eastham.
For.
Councillor Gavin Edwards.
For.
Councillor Paul Fleming.
For.
Councillor Tom Flynn.
For.
Councillor Renata Hamvers. For. Councillor Barry Hargrove. Councillor John Hartley.
For.
Councillor William Houndgo.
For.
Councillor Sirajul Islam. Councillor Peter John.
For.
Councillor Nick Johnson.
For.
Councillor Eleanor Kersley. For. Councillor Sarah King. For. Councillor Sonny Lamb. For. Councillor Lorraine Lauder. For. Councillor Richard Lehman.
For.
Councillor Maria Limford Roll.
For.
Councillor Richard Livingstone.
For.
Councillor Rebecca Laurie.
For.
Councillor Alice MacDonald.
For.
Councillor Eliza Mann. For. Councillor James Macash.
For.
Councillor Hamish McCallum.
For.
Councillor Darren Merrill.
For.
Councillor Vicky Mills. For. Councillor Adele Morris. Councillor Graham Neill. Councillor Maggie Newens. Councillor David Noakes.
For.
Councillor Damien O'Brien.
For.
Councillor Jason Ocherry.
For.
Councillor Victoria Olisa.
For.
Councillor Leo Polak.
For.
Councillor Sandra Rule.
For.
Councillor Catherine Rose, Madam Mayor. Councillor Jane Salmon. For. Councillor Martin Seaton.
For.
Councillor Andy Simmons.
For.
Councillor Johnson C2.
For.
Councillor Michael C2.
For.
Councillor Charlie Smith.
For.
Councillor Cleo Soames.
For.
Councillor Leanne Werner.
For.
Councillor Dan Whitehead.
For.
Councillor Kath Whitlam.
For.
Councillor Bill Williams is not present. Councillor Kieran Williams.
For.
Councillor Ian Wingfield.
For.
I will now announce the vote on the substantive recommendation. Carried unanimously. So, those in favour of the substantive? Oh, sorry. 2.5. So now we're on item 2.4, capital programme refresh for 2018 to 19 to 2027 to 2028. Oh, sorry. The substantive is carried. Item 2.4, oh no, failure to pass the council tax, that would be great, wouldn't it? Capital programme refresh for 2018-19 to 2027 to 28. The Cabinet Member for Finance, Performance and Brexit will present the report. Councillor Vicky Mills, you have 5 minutes in which to speak if you wish.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. Again, I will try not to take 5 minutes, but I do think that even though this comes at the end of the evening, it's absolutely right and proper that we celebrate a truly exciting and life-changing capital programme. We have been a capital-rich borough over the last 9 years, and that has allowed us to make investments, big one-off investments that we have not been able to perhaps do with our revenue fund. So, here we are with a capital programme, the general fund, which is worth nearly £800 million over the next 10 years, and a housing investment programme that is worth over £2 billion over the next 10 years. But that has not been enough for us, and yet again we are agreeing new additions to our capital programme. So that programme has delivered new leisure centres, delivered new libraries, delivered amazing new schools. That does not end, that continues. And I'm delighted, as people will see in Appendix E, that we are putting in the capital that we need to build the amazing Walworth Library and Heritage Centre that bit of the borough truly deserves. We are investing in council staff by making sure that we have a depot that is fit for purpose. Another investment in one of our schools, Riverside Primary, which has seen the impact of the Chambers Wharf and the Thames Tunnel development, proper investment in Riverside Primary so that they have some great new buildings. Further investment in bed-based care, particularly for adults, to make sure that actually we are lessening some of the revenue impacts on our budget in adult social care. We've seen really amazing investment in playgrounds over the last, in particular, 4 years. That commitment for a quality playground in every ward. I know myself that in Peckham Rye, with the sunny weather that we've had over the last week, the amazing playground there has been filled to bursting. So I'm delighted that we are going to invest in Fredericks and Surrey Docks adventure play sites. And then again, some really kind of strong commitments around kind of climate change, air quality, with our 20-mile-an-hour zones, making sure that those roads that should be 20-mile-an-hour zones, we're not just having wishful thinking, we're not just saying we want residents to drive at 20 miles an hour, we're actually doing something about it. And then finally, on crime, there's further investment in CCTV, cycle storage and moped security. So those massive figures were not enough, and that there are more things that will be added to the programme.
Thank you. I have one member that's indicated he wishes to speak, so I'll call Councillor Richard Livingston.
Just going to be very brief, and I think as other people have done already, I wanted to thank Councillor Mills for her hard work over this as well as the budget. I think this capital programme is very welcome. I think some of the changes were made on the highways. Councillor Mills mentioned the 20-mile-an-hour zone money that we're putting in here, which is very welcome. You'll have seen in recommendation 2 that we are looking also about how we're funding the lower road section of Cycle Super Highway 4, so I just wanted to draw people's attention to that. And whilst I haven't necessarily agreed with all the tweets that come from the other side this evening, I do want to thank Councillor McCallum for his tweet about the consultation about the Jamaica Road stretch of this. So there clearly are some things that we do have a universal view across the chamber on, and it's good that we're all singing the same song to make life in Southwark better for cyclists and pedestrians.
Thank you. Councillor Mills, do you wish to respond? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. We should now move on to the vote on the recommendations. 2.4, vote on the report recommendations and to note amendments to the recommendation as per the programme motion. Item 2.4, capital programme refresh. Recommendation 3 to be amended to refer to 1,305 million rather than 2,100 million to be considered as normal. Those in favour? Agreed unanimously. The substantive is carried. Thank you all very much. That was the last item of business. And once again, happy birthday, Duncan.